Yeah, we are excited.
What goes on?
I think we're not going to remain.
Okay. Want the second one?
Yes, please.
You gonna watch it later?
starting a public, okay, a letter to members. Okay. It's like format. So like, could you, so I have to figure out exactly what I want. So I'm just recommend, yeah, and that's like a letter, almost making it like a musical, one page of music.
On in the room? Great. Hi, everyone. Happy Hanukkah. Good to see you all. So in just a minute, we'll get started. So appreciative to Hadas for being here. I also I want everyone to know, we don't have a ton of people in the room, but I know there are a lot of people at home on YouTube. So you might not be able to see them, but this is a true hybrid event. So I'm really glad to see the people in front of me. The people that I can't see right now, I'm really glad you're here too, and that we're all celebrating Hanukkah together. I'm going to start with a very brief kind of Dvar Torah, because, that's part of my job and I just can't resist. I am Alex. I should start with an introduction. I'm Alex Matthews. I'm the congregational leader here at Congregation Ahavas Achim in Newburyport. And really what I want to start with is I just want to introduce candle lighting, because we are here tonight, gathered tonight for the fifth night of Hanukkah, and so we should take every opportunity we can get to light these 5 candles. And really what's at the core of the mitzvah of candle lighting, in Hebrew it's called Pirsume Nisa. It's called amplifying the miracle of the candles, the oil, the 8 nights, whatever you think of as the miracle. It's our job as the Jewish people to really spread that miracle far and wide. What they discuss in the Talmud is that the best way to do that is to put the menorah in front of a window so that anybody walking by outside can see the lights burning brightly and know that you're celebrating Hanukkah inside and get some of that light and joy and all of that Hanukkah spirit. I can think of kind of no greater window than the World Wide Web. And so as I stare at the camera in front of me and also the smiling faces in front of me, I think we're kind of doing maybe some ultimate form of that mitzvah of Pirsume Nisa by lighting the candles all together to get started tonight. So for folks who are here in the room, I'm going to invite you to rise, and hopefully you know the blessings and are comfortable singing them along with me as we light the Hanukkah candles together. I'm also going to count on all of those in the room as these burn behind Hadas as she's speaking, just to keep an eye on them, because Hanukkah candles, while beautiful, I always get a little bit nervous. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Chanukah, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavoteinu, bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh. And I'm going to spare all of you me singing Ma'oz Sur out loud over a mic and into the internet. And instead, as we appreciate the light of these 5 nights, these 5 candles, it is my honor to introduce past president of CAA, Sue Latham, to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thanks. Welcome everyone here tonight. Thank you so much for coming, and also online. Welcome everyone. I'm really excited to introduce a dear friend, Hadas Ragolsky. We met 20 years ago. I was just starting a master's degree program in journalism at University of California in Berkeley. And I went to the first gathering of all the students in Northgate in this building, and we were all sitting there, and somehow I figured out that there was an Israeli there, and it was this woman, and I was really excited to meet this Israeli. So I think within the next week or two, I started searching for where I could buy challah on Friday. So I went and I found some challah in Kensington, which was the next town up from Berkeley. And I went and bought this challah on Friday. And I went and found her in the TV lab and I gave her this loaf of challah. And that was the initiation of our friendship. So we're now here today. And just before the pandemic, I was actually visiting Israel and I was able to celebrate Hanukkah with her family. And now we're here 2 years later. It's really wonderful to be here. So welcome, Hadas.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Max said I should stand here, so it's okay. My name is Hadas Ragolsky. I'm the chief editor of an Israeli women website called On Life. I've been a journalist for the last 20 plus years, and I worked mainly on the Israeli TV stations, first Channel 10 and then Channel 2, which became Channel 12 now. And so I work in news business for ages. And in the last 4 or 5 years, I focus on women issues and gender equality and social issues. And this is the reason when Sue asked me to talk, I mean, I agreed 5 years ago, but I only came now. And Alex said, it's Chanukah, you should talk something about that has to do with Chanukah. So I decided I will choose 5 women, which are, I think, of a great light. Each woman will represent one candle for us. And I will talk about them. I should say about myself, I didn't, and I should. I live in Tel Aviv. I have 3 kids. My parents live in Moshav, which is called Netiv HaAsara. It's north to Gaza Strip, just near Sderot, if you know. They get missiles every now and then. Yeah, well, so I'm a complete example of how complicated lives in Israel are. And yeah, and one of the biggest steps I did in my past was to come to UC Berkeley, where I met Sue. And ever since, we traveled all across, back and forth. So I'm really glad to be here tonight. So I'm going to speak about 5 women. And I'm going to start with, I'm going to bring the light with those 5 women. And the first ones I'm going to speak about, you can see the picture. You can see 2 women. First, I should say, I'm going to speak about Lily Ben Ami. She's the one on the left, on the right side for you. But let me first talk about her sister, the one with the curly hair. Her name is Michal Sela. She was a 32 years old social worker that was slaughtered 2 years ago by her husband and the father of back then a 1-year-old baby. And when she died, when she was murdered, I think it broke something in the Israeli society. And the reason why, I mean, for years we've been trying to talk about it, to promote issues I mean, we just, last week we mentioned the International Day to End Violence Against Women. But Michal Sela is, I'm sorry to say, but she's the kind of victim that you see yourself in it. And it's not an unprivileged woman that you say, okay, something happened, it has to do with culture, blah, blah, blah. She was us. And that changed something. And Lily stood up and she said, if it happened to us, it can happen to every single family in Israel. And ever since, she's been fighting, Lily. So, instead of, she's not focusing on grieving, she's focusing on finding solutions. She's a social activist before this tragic. And now she focuses on that issue. When Michal was slaughtered, I wrote back then a piece that said the title was "The Next Victim Gonna Be One of Your Friends on Social Media." But Lily didn't just write. She established a forum called Michal Sela Forum that focuses on what we can do to stop violence against women, and especially murder of women. Her goal is to reach 0 murdered women in Israel. I don't know if she can do that, but at least she has the inspiration. And she's so enthusiastic about it and so convinced that she can do it, that no one actually is saying no to whatever this wonderful woman is saying. What she basically says is that since Israel is number 1 in cyber and in war against terror and in technology, what we should do is use technology to end violence against women. And in recent talk with Sheryl Sandberg, she said, it took us 2 years to find vaccination to COVID-19. It should take us the same amount of time, or 10 years, but we should find vaccination to violence against women. And so the first woman I want to talk is Lily, because she's a great light, and she's been doing a great deal to Israeli society and worldwide, I would say. She just came back from the UN, speaking on the 25th. And she's spreading the words out there, and I hope technology will end it, or at least some of it. Let's move to the other person I want to talk, and the second person will be Esther Chayut. Esther Chayut is 68 years old. She's the Supreme Court President of Israel, and she's been serving since 2017 as the President of the Supreme Court. And she's the 3rd woman to hold that position, and she is one of 12 women judges that served in the Supreme Court. So our numbers are better than the US, but it's not enough. Like, it's really good, it's prestigious, it's amazing, it's honorable. It's not enough. We know that. Esther Chayut herself has it's amazing bio, so I should talk about her a little bit. She was born in, seriously, one of the least privileged neighborhood in Israel. She was born to 2 Holocaust survivors who were divorced when she was a year old. And so her grandparents raised her, and she rejoined her mom only when she was 17. And she rejoined her in Eilat. Eilat is not a city that one would think that will raise a Supreme Court judge, but there she is. During her army service, she joined the army band. She's a singer. So she's also the only singer judge that we have. I bet you don't have one like that either. And so she's a singer judge, and you can actually find on YouTube some of her previous singing career or whatever. But she's been judged for many, many years now. She's going to serve till 2023, because in Israel, you don't serve for life. You serve till you're 70. We don't do the RGB mistake of someone dying and stuff. So she has 2 more years to go. And on the general picture, I would say 52% of the Israeli judges now are women, which is good. But as you climb up the ladder of positions, you get to see less women and more men. And now we have on the Supreme Court, we have 1/4 women taking seats. It's good, but it's not enough. You see a lot of women serving as prosecutors and as defenders. I would say at least half. But as you see, many women coming into the field of law, the salaries get lower, so they soar down. It become a feminine occupation. Same happens, by the way, with doctors. 50% of the Israeli residents these days are women. So you see much more women going in the wards in hospitals. And you see much more men occupying private sector and having a lot of money. So yeah, I guess you know that. My next character, her name is Malka Piotrakovsky. It's such a hard name to say, even though my name is Ragolsky and she's Piotrakovsky, and so we're both Polish oriented, but still I'm going to call her Malka for you. She's a student and a teacher of Talmud and Jewish law. She's Eshet Halacha. For many people in Israel, she's actually official Eshet Halacha. She makes halacha, which is surprising because Israeli is not so well known for women teaching halacha, but she is. And she's been part of this a bigger revolution that I will speak about. She has made two really important, I'm going to focus on two, but she's been part of a lot of stuff. But she's the most important stuff that I see in what she's been doing in the previous years was first that the one that she says she's not against abortion, if to relate to what happened in your Supreme Court yesterday. She said that unwanted pregnancy shouldn't be the reason to pre-marriage before people are mature enough or they have the economical stability to create a family. So she's not against abortion, which is unique here and there as well. And the other thing was that last year she said that during women in Nida, that we should consider allowing touch. People, women and men should be able to touch each other during Nida, while mourning or soaring or in pain, because she said it's unbelievable that woman, for instance, who lost her dad or a baby will not be able to be confronted with a husband or yes. Nida. Oh, how do you say Nida? Alex, help me.
All right, so I'll step in real briefly. Nida is a halachic concept, a concept of Jewish law that's held in many very generally in Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox communities, where a woman's menstruation brings on a state of ritual impurity, where the most strict observances, as Hadas was referring to, a husband would not even touch his wife, like to give a comforting hug, something after a loss, something like that. It's more so about preventing sex during that state of impurity, but in the most extreme cases, it really is like a time period up to like 2 weeks of a month when a husband and wife will not touch at all.
No, it's not really Orthodox. It's actually general. Also, modern Orthodox will keep Nida. So it's a big issue. And she said we should allow touch, okay? She's here in my presentation because she reflects something bigger, where you can see more and more women insist on find their own way and their own passes through religious Judaism. It's really interesting because you can see many Orthodox religious women, feminists, religious women who will insist on having their own way of doing stuff, including reading the Torah, including holding the books or praying at the wall, or I took Susan to do praying in the wall. We did her bat mitzvah at the wall. But also on a regular daily life, which is to me more important. For instance, there is a woman called Dvorah Evron. She's the spiritual leader of Bar Ilan University. Bar Ilan University is it's a religious university in Israel. And usually it used to have kind of, one of the rabbis was a spiritual leader, and they chose a woman to be the spiritual leader of this specific university, which is amazing because it's the only religious university in Israel. And the other example I want to give is Chen Artzisro. She's a reporter, she's a writer, she's a columnist. She just received a column in Yediot Achronot, which is the largest Israeli newspaper. And she gets to write whatever she wants, and she's a religious woman. And we have another woman called Sivan Rav Meir, who's an anchor on the Israeli TV, and she's actually ultra-Orthodox woman working as a journalist. And they're kind of insisting on being anywhere, being judges, being doctors, or being a journalist, and they insist on saying their own words. Now, it's interesting because it's baby steps, okay? And the more religious parties in Israel, and they insist on being this, islands of men, and they don't allow women to be elected to the parties, even though the Supreme Court already judged that they already ruled that it's illegal not to have women in their parties, but they keep on doing that, okay? So it's a constant fight. And it's baby steps, but you can see that they're going towards somewhere. And we, as secular feminist women in Israel, we want to help them, but we can't do it for them, okay? They have to do that journey by themselves. I mean, we will support, but we don't want to ruin their efforts because they want to do it their own way. They are insisting on being religious. They're insisting on keeping tradition in their own way. And we as secular Jews can't really help them make it to make it faster. I mean, we do escort them when they approach Supreme Court, for instance, of course, and we write in favor of them, but we don't do it for them. It's a big difference, okay? They insist that we will not do it for them. And whenever we try to interfere, they say, you don't interfere. We do it our own way. So we respect that. So Malka is a great representation of that. She was also part of, they established something that is called Takana. Takana is kind of a gathering of religious Jews, permanent rabbis and women, all kinds of rabbinic figures that handled what is sexual assaults in their community. They said way too many women and men didn't approach police. And so instead they had this form called takana. So people will approach them and they will take care of attackers. And the most famous one is Rabbi Moti Alon, who actually attacked few of his students. And Takana decided to expel him from where he was to and they ruled that he can't teach anymore. So they didn't go through the process, the prosecution, and they didn't go through the court system, but he was expelled. It's a big debate whether we should allow such a thing to be part of life in Israel at all, because we should use jurisdictional system. But it had its own share of kind of calling out for people. Don't be afraid. Speak up. Stand up for your rights. Talk about what happened to you. And so you see more and more people approaching police and saying what happened to them. And you get to see much more baby steps, okay? But you see people more approaching police and filing complaints against their attackers, which wasn't the case 5 years ago. And it's also because of what Malka and her friends did in Takana. Okay. The next person I want to talk is a little bit about culture. This is Sarit Haddad. Have you heard of her, maybe? Sarit Haddad, she's a singer. You know, when they have those lists of 10 most successful singers in the country, or the best 10 songs of the year or something, in Israel it turns out to be mainly men. And the only singer that succeeded through the years to be this permanent singer is Sarit Haddad. She has a career, a 20 years career at least, and she has an interesting story for herself. She grew up in Hadera. I doubt whether any of you heard of Hadera. Hadera is one of the, I don't know, one of the small towns of Israel. She grew up in a family that originally came from Georgia, and very religious and conservative and strict. And she became a famous singer, singing Mediterranean songs. I mean, she sings what we call Mizrahi. I'm not a huge fan of the way she sings, but she's extraordinary with what she did with herself and the path that she took. She became 3 years ago a single mom, now having 2 babies, 2 kids by her own, which is a big no-no for her way of raising up and the community she comes from, or the audience that hear her music. But she's a single mom, and what happened 3 months ago was that she came out of the closet, which is this, woo! Actually, that happened. Now, everybody in the community knew that she was gay, but she wouldn't come out. And so some of them said, oh, finally she decided that she will use it or something. But it's a huge step, huge, because she's Beyonce, right? Okay, she's Beyonce. She's #1 singer in Israel. And she came out of the closet and she says, this is the woman I love. And I think it's a huge thing to do. Especially when you look at the audience that hear the songs that she sings, that sings it, that worship her, and she make it much more part of regular life in Israel, I would say. So she did an important thing. If you look at the wider picture, gay community in Israel, it's much more I would say common. Common is not the word for it. I wrote down a word that I wanted to use. Let me see. what was it? The approach had changed, that's for sure, in the last 15 years. Now we have a general commander who's gay. We have the Minister of Health who's gay. Our previous Minister of Social Services was gay. We have few parliament members who are openly gay. We don't have any lesbian, gay parliament member, you know, God forbidden, because, you know, open gay is okay. Open lesbian is a total different story in Israel. So we're really open for gays to hold positions. We're not as open for women. But we do have few lesbian women taking positions in the government, not as ministers, but deputy ministers and stuff like that. And I think we're doing much, much better. Gays still cannot marry in Israel. I think it became almost the last obstacle. Everything else can be done in Israel. They can have, they can adopt kids, they can have surrogate kids, they can register wherever, they can have joint families. And if I look at the school that my kid go to, it's in Tel Aviv, so it's what they know. It's not a question even. They have the five, I mean, that's the regular life for them. But it's not like that in every city in Israel, but it becomes like that in most cities of Israel. You see gay parade, we have gay parade in every single town in Israel these days. So I would say it used to be only Tel Aviv, and then it became Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and then Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and maybe Beersheba, but now it's everywhere, and it's great. It's great. It's great. It's part of our lives. There is still a way to go, but I think we're doing that. I think we're almost there. Now, my number 5 character, number 5, the 5th candle is Merav Michaeli. She's the Minister of Transport and Road Safety in Israel. And she's a proud and open feminist. I think she's, for the first time, a truly, she's official feminist. She advocates for women issues for her entire life, and that was the ticket she was elected for, which is something. She wasn't elected for anything else. That was the reason why she was elected. Now she became the Labour Party head. The Labour Party was almost, it was a dying symbol, okay? There was no Labour Party anymore. And she came, and like the phoenix, she brought it back from ashes. And she did it like in 5 months or so. I mean, she did it so fast. And she was the first one to elect a party which has, she was the head, so the second one was a man, and then a woman, a man, woman, a man, woman. She was insistent, she was having 50% or 50%, which none of the other parties insisted on. And she's, when she talked to audience, you know, in Hebrew, we talk either female or male. So she talks only female. It doesn't matter what the audience is, and it drives men nuts because she keeps on talking to female language, which is great. Because the rule says that if you have a joint group of people, men and women, you should use the men language, but she uses the female language the whole time, the whole system. So she's something. I would say two more things about her. One is that at the age of 54, which she is, she became a mom 4 months ago. She was a serious advocate against surrogate moms and for adoption, but she ended up using surrogate mom. And people were, why? You were talking against it so many years. And then, she said, it's the right, she chose differently. So that was the one thing. And the other thing is that she's part of this weird government that we have these days. You've probably heard. The main issue that combines the people in this government, I mean, it's a government that has right-wing people, central parties, leftist parties, all together. And this whole idea that actually created this government is that they wanted Netanyahu to go away. And so because people are it's a joint venture of so many different ideas and ideals, so they focus only on issues that they can agree on, and there aren't as many. So they focus on transportation, health, and education, and environment. Whoa, I mean, that's exactly what I hoped the government would focus on, but it's the first time in years that Israel has a government that focuses on those issues, just because they can't focus on occupied territories, should we build in there or not build in there, Palestinians, we can't talk about Palestine, we can't talk about territories, we can't talk about religion because we don't agree on anything. So let's focus on the things that we agree on. And it's a huge shift. It's a great shift. I would never choose Naftali Bennett to be my prime minister, but to be honest, he's doing quite a good job, okay? And being the headmaster of this really weird government. We never had something like that. But it works. Till now, it works. And Merav Michaeli is a permanent member of it. And if we look at the bigger picture, there are 10 Israeli women ministers in the government, which is nice, which is kind of what Biden has right now. But it's 10 out of 28. So it is still 1/3. It's not what we should have. In the Israeli parliament, women are 1/4, just like the States. So we still have a lot of work to do. And we hardly have any mayors, which in the States you do have a lot of women mayors, not in Israel. In Israel we have few. I can name them. I remember each one of them. So it's not as popular as it is here in the States. So she's my fifth. And I think there are, you can read about each one of them and their activities. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, women in Israel did actually big steps towards where we are at right now. But it's not enough. So we're fighting against violence. It's a big issue, violence against women, rapes, assault, how we manage Me Too in Israel. We did some steps facing Me Too, but there are so many other fields that didn't touch it till now, and they're now starting to deal with it. Also in the more Orthodox communities. We have a lot to do, but I think we're doing whatever we can. And that's it. That's the 5 people I want to talk, but you can ask about whoever you want right now. questions.
Thank you, Hadas. That was wonderful. I'm just going to request that if people have questions, that they let me bring them the mic so that the folks watching
please do.
online can hear your questions as well. There we go.
Please do.
I have a question. So the Women at the Wall movement, can
Yeah.
you talk about that? My understanding from a while ago was that more American women were in favor of it than Israeli women, that it wasn't that important to Israeli women. So can you talk about that movement a little bit?
Yeah. I would say something else first. I think while being here many times by now, I realized that we as a society in Israel, we're missing a lot because we are so against the Orthodox way that we just abandoned the whole thing, okay? So you guys are practicing more Judaism than I do, living as a secular in Israel. And it has to do with your question, why? Because if I raise my kids non-Orthodox, because it's almost the only way to raise kids in Israel. I mean, we have such a small amount of people who are Reforms or conservative. You don't have those synagogues next door or the next town that you can just pop in. So we end up not doing anything, okay? So we end up not fighting for the kotel to be part of our lives because it doesn't matter for us anymore. So we're missing a lot by doing so. I know. But I know it only by coming back and forth to the States. Beforehand, while raising up, as you raise up as a Jewish in Israel, you practice all the holidays, right? I mean, Chanukah is a big deal in Israel. It's a non-issue because we celebrate Chanukah and we celebrate all the holidays. But on the daily basis things, we don't have the community around synagogues. We have our community. It has nothing to do with the synagogue. And the same goes with the women of the wall. Women of the wall are the women who insist to pray in the wall. So they need to be people who wants to pray, right? That's not me. They want to pray. So they're religious, kind of religious, whatever. I mean, on the spectrum of religious women. Yeah, they're a minor group. They're not a big group. I don't know if to say Americans are more interested in them than other ones. I actually had an interesting conversation once with the man who was the head of the conservative movement in Israel. And I told him, you know, why don't you invest the same amount of money? I mean, if you invested $1 billion as you can do it, or $200 million in building conservative movement in Israel, then the whole system would be changed. And he said, no one is actually caring to do so. And I said, you know, this is the best tikkun olam that you can make. And yeah, the Women of the Wall is a minor group, and they don't get a lot of support, but they practice their own way of doing stuff, I guess. Yeah.
When you talk about women at the wall, I mean, the women have their own side. Are you talking about like this movement wants to have men and women together? Is that
No.
what it is?
There's two different issues in the kotel. The one is that Women of the Wall wants to pray with Torah books on the wall. And they're doing so in their side. The wall,
Right, there's two sides. to it.
there's two sides. One is men, one is women, and they want to pray on the women's side, but to bring in Torah books.
And they're not allowed to do that.
And they are
right
not
now?
allowed to. So that's the first fight. The second fight is something that The conservative and reform Jews from the state succeeded to convince the Israeli government to form a united part of the world where men and women can pray together. Now, Netanyahu's government agreed and then withdraw the agreement to do so. So we still don't have that common place for men and women to pray together on the wall.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
I'm just curious about the transgender movement in Israel and gender, what's the word? Fluidity.
Maybe I should have had another light, another candle. Yeah. My other candle should be we have now a soccer judge. Her name is Sapir Berman. She used to be Sagi Berman, and she's a trans, and she became this. I think she's maybe. No, she's not the most famous. She was almost the most famous trans in Israel, becoming from men to women, because the big issue is that she's a soccer judge. Okay, soccer is a big deal in Israel. That's the thing. Everybody is talking about soccer. That's the main sports in Israel. And so she's the first judge or the first soccer player to become a woman. And it was so natural, the way she was accepted by the players, by the system, by the Ministry of Sports. I mean, it was amazing. It happened last year. So we do have like those lights of things happen, which are great, like Sapir Berman. Another famous one is Dana International. I don't know if you heard of her name. She's a singer. She was the first trans to win the Eurovision contest. Not just the Israeli one to win the Israeli contest, but she won the Europe contest, okay? And that was 20 years ago. So we have those lights along the way of good stuff happening, but I think that trans movement, just like here, still suffers from high suicide mortality. They find it hard to find jobs. I think they have hard lives wherever they are. I mean, people like me are doing the best we can to make them part of society. And we have those glimpses of inspiration, because when you see Sapir Berman being part, like showing off on the field, and people are clipping and you know, she became a huge symbol for any kid who was thinking of being a trans, right? Because there she was in the midst of this muscular place between the soccer players, and here she is, and she's doing her best, and she's a great soccer judge. So, I mean, it's not enough, but it's getting there. I mean, we're doing the best we can, I guess. Not enough. Sure.
Thank you. I was just curious if any of these women or other women in the feminist movement are trying to reach across aisles, borders, work with Palestinian women as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, let's talk about Palestinians. Why not? Many of the, I mean, we have exchange cross ideas with Palestinians feminist Palestinians, etc. I would say that I should be honest and say that Israelis these days don't see many of the Palestinians in general. They're behind walls. They're over there, kind of. And since there was less terror, so we were not forced to talk about them. So we're not talking about them. So they're not an issue anymore. So we're not talking about Palestinians in general, not just women or men or children or whatever. We just don't. I interviewed the woman who was the head of the UC, how would they call it? The Human Rights Association. You have the same in the States. No, not women. The civil rights movement. The head of the civil rights movement in Israel. She's a woman, and she just stepped down. And I told her, "How come you're not focusing on Palestinians anymore?" And she said, "Well, we focus on the main issues and the main problems, and we have so many problems these days, so we don't focus on Palestinians' issues anymore." But it used to be that there was civil rights issues, Palestinian civil rights issues that were dealt on various Supreme Court decisions, but on a regular day-to-day basis, we don't focus on Palestinians as much as before. We have our own problems. We have other issues. Oh yeah, yeah. We just had a conference for the 25th, for the International Day to End Violence Against Women, and I think 40% of the speakers were Arab feminists speaking out. It was in Tel Aviv. It was great, actually, because when you look on the people the women who get killed or get murdered, 50%, 60% are Arabs, if not 70%. There are more women who are Arab Israeli who are murdered than Jewish women, but we still have this fight together. We have tons of issues, regardless of women issues, to deal with. But this weird government that we have includes, for the first time, it includes our party. So, baby steps. It happened.
Leslie, I saw your hand up, and then maybe this will be the last one.
Okay, it's interesting to me. Thank you. That was really interesting.
You're welcome.
But it's interesting to me that in Israel, women can fight. In fact, they have to. They have to be part of the army, but
Yeah.
they can't be part of the government. I mean, what is it? Is it just that there's not enough people, if they didn't include the women, to have an army? And why is that acceptable when it's not for women to be in other positions?
It's interesting. To my mind, it goes back to the core issue of not deciding to separate between religion and the regular lives in Israel. I mean, the separation between state and religion, which they haven't done, and which they should have done in 48 when they formed the country. And while deciding not to do so, we're stuck forever with that situation of religious party and religious group having political power to influence the lives in Israel, where in different countries, they wouldn't allow to be doing that, right? and so there were movements of taking decisions of like, yeah, everyone should serve in the army, right? But Orthodox religious Jews don't join because they were exempted somehow because of that not separating religion and state back then. And the same goes elsewhere. I mean, everybody can be elected to the parliament, except those parties not electing women into their system. Now, if you ask religious women, Orthodox religious women, whether they want to be elected, yes, they do. Whether they think they should be exempted, no. They think we shouldn't exempt them. But it was too easy for the secular Jews to pay the price of like, who cares? So we will abolish the rights of Orthodox women in order to satisfy the Orthodox man, right? I hope it does. I mean, we're fighting towards it, but at the same time, they're trying to do separation between men and women in universities and in colleges and in all kinds of public spaces, which are not allowed, but they're still trying to push again and again and again and again. And I mean, it's a constant fight. So they try to separate in a bus. So you fight against it, but then they do it in a bus which goes between the religious cities. So you don't know what that happened there. So you don't fight that. You fight that, and then you find it's happened there, and you fight that, and then you find it in a different place. I mean, it's a constant fight. And when you have a government like we had that was based on criminals plus Orthodox Jews, then you formed a coalition of people where the Likud party were willing to pay anything they can to the religious Jews in order to keep that system working with those people, with Netanyahu and his fellows having to pay those prices. Now, for the first time in 13 years, we have a government that actually served the people and not someone in the government. So let's hope. Let's hope they will survive. Yeah.
Joan? It's up to you, Hadas. You have
No,
energy for one
I'm
more
okay. Well, you
question?
can ask. I'm here.
So is it true that I know my non-religious relatives in Israel, their children went to Cyprus to get married because for some reason you can't get married the way you want in Israel with the religious government.
We didn't separate religion and state.
You're right, but if you did, it would be hard for it to be a Jewish state. That I agree. I agree with separation of.
I don't know if it would have been harder to be a Jewish state. I honestly don't think so. I think that if we had separated religion and state, we had much more religious Jews in Israel, to be honest. I think that there were more chances that someone like me was still being, I don't know if religious, but participant in such a community like yours. But I can't. I just can't. Because when I see what they do to women, and when I see what they do to separate and discriminate and all this stuff, I can't be part of it. And since I can't be part of it, I don't find my own community. So I have big accusations against David Ben-Gurion, who's completely dead. But I mean, it's really hard to reverse that. And the reason why people go to marry in Cyprus is if you don't want to have religious marriage, then you don't have other options. There is no city hall marriage like you have here, right? So you have to marry somewhere else. But then you come back to Israel and you married in Cyprus. But if you want to divorce and you both are Jewish, according to halakha, then you still need to divorce according to halakha, even though you got married in New York or Cyprus or France. It doesn't matter. That's the law. So I got married actually according to halakha in Israel with a special rabbi who quoted poems of famous poem writers and stuff. And it was great. And it was beautiful. It was wonderful. But when I will go through divorce process, I will have to go to rabbinic process, which is lame. Yeah.
I know it changes all the, I know thank you. It changes all the time, but I think it would help this group to understand the politics of Israel. If you could explain what is roughly the percentage of secular Jews in Israel versus Orthodox Jews or ultra-religious? And I know the religious community tend to have a lot of children, so their numbers go up, but just to give us a sense of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It used to be that we used to say that 50% of the population is secular, 30% would be light Orthodox Jews, kind of, or Masorti. How do you say Masorti, Alex?
It's the equivalent of the conservative movement.
Yeah, but they're not conservative.
They're not the conservative
God
movement,
forbid
but
it.
it is.
They're not conservative.
It is the
Orthodox.
Israeli equivalent of the conservative movement.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of conservative. And then we had ultra-Orthodox 20%, or they used to be 15% or 8%, but now they're 20%. And the amount of kids they have, they're about to have like 50% of the kids in Jerusalem now are ultra-Orthodox kids. But when you see, for instance, Yom Kippur, so every single person in the country will preserve Yom Kippur, even if they will not fast. They will. It's the quietest day on the country. So some holidays will be preserved by 80%, 90% of the population. But going to synagogue is a different issue. And only the conservative, Masorti Jewish and the ultra-Orthodox Jews will do that. Now, what happened is that there are different streams that become more popular. For instance, a wider group of people used to be conservative, Masorti, but in them started to have this stream of ultra-conservative, which will be halfway between ultra-Orthodox and conservative. And these, most of the fanatic settlers are in this midst of not being part of the yeshiva system, but not being part of the conservative system. So it's something in between. Most of the settlers are not ultra-Orthodox or this new stream. Most of them will be just conservative or secular, but still they have this stream of people that became bigger. And when you look at it, this parliament, there is a party of 6 members out of 120, and they call themselves the religious Zionism, and they are far from religious Zionists. They're racist. They're basically racist and fascists and women haters. And they have 6 seats at the parliament, which is huge. I mean, these people were banned before. In previous parliaments, they were banned. I don't know if you know Kahana Chai, but he was the Israeli most famous fascist, and he was banned. And now his predecessors are back, 6 of them. So we have a lot of fight to do. I mean, we did a lot of progress. There's 10 ministers, there's 50% judges, we have a Supreme Court president, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have those 6 members of the parliament that fighting us on every single thing that you can think of. Even writing, even like they started doing those, it's one of the fights. Just, I will give you one example. I mean, liberal people demanded that on public statements that you have one parent, second parent, instead of, we used to have mom and dad. So many people asked, let us have one parent, first parent, second parent, or parent and a parent, that's it, instead of mom and dad. So the security of, the Minister of Security decided he will do one parent, second parent. And they decided to do a full fight about it. No, we should have a mom and dad. Mom and dad is normal. Mom and dad is normal. Not one parent, second parent. And we said, no, one parent, second parent. So, and it's a simple for a fight. But at the same time, I would say yesterday, your Supreme Court was deciding, I mean, there was debating whether to reverse Roe versus Wade, where in Israel, yesterday, the Minister of Health decided to start abolishing the abortion committees, because we have abortion committees that authorize abortion, and they decided, no, it should be a medical procedure. So in that sense, we're in a bigger, I mean, we're in a better place than you are, right? I mean, we're going to abolish those committees. The abortion committees are going to be a history soon. I know. The Republican Party is full of them. So this is so it's interesting because it all happened yesterday, and actually the reason why it happened yesterday is because of you, because of what happened in your Supreme Court. The health minister, who's gay, decided that would be the specific day that he will say, okay, we're going to fight abortion committees. Okay, so we are doing progress.
Question. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Oh. So in Israel, because there is a religious overarching system, is a gay couple able to adopt a child?
Yes, because the state decided it's doable. But the state decided that in recent years, it's not something that it was like that 20 years ago. It happened in the last few years. But interesting enough, when you look at the army service, for instance, not just that the army service allows gay people to join the army because it's a compulsory, everyone should go. The army will sponsor trans surgeries. It's part of the services that they will supply. So they will do anything to have soldiers. I don't know. I mean, you can do the transition during the army service. It's actually cheaper to do it during the army service because the army pays for that. So yeah, it comes alongside, right? So in one side you have this, and we have a chief commander. We have a lot of commanders in the army which are gay, openly gay. It's okay. We have trans commanders, officers. And at the same time, we have those people fighting us over the one parent, second parents. I mean, it's a big deal.
Let's give Hadas one more round of applause. The candles are
Thank
just
you.
about burned down, which means it's probably time to get home and prepare for the bat mitzvah. I want to thank Hadas one more time for coming all this way and sharing her expertise with us. I don't think there are enough nights of Chanukah to share all the great stories you would have to share. I also want to thank Sue for bringing Hadas here, and also the Synagogue Council of Massachusetts, who's supporting this speaker series. So thank you to them as well. I want to thank the folks who came out, thank the folks who are watching at home, and wish you all a happy Hanukkah. And we'll keep these conversations going. Thank you, Hadas. It was
Yeah.
great having you. Happy
Thank
Hanukkah.
you for inviting me.